Shy housekeeper noticed symptoms the doctors missed and saved the millionaire's life. Sarah Johnson had been cleaning hospital rooms for 3 years without any of the important patients even knowing her name. At 28, she was raising 2 young children alone and studying nursing in the few spare hours she had. It was during her morning cleaning of room 312 that she noticed the strange reddish marks on Robert Thompson's leg, the most feared businessman in New York City. He was there for routine tests, but those marks didn't seem normal for someone who was supposed to be healthy. "Excuse me, doctor," she whispered, arranging the clean towels. "I saw some marks on your leg and—" "You're here to clean, not give medical opinions." Robert cut her off without even looking at her. "Do your job quietly." Sarah felt her face burn with shame. It wasn't the first time she'd been treated like that at the hospital, but something inside her insisted those marks were important. Over the next 5 days, she discreetly observed. The marks changed color and size, especially after Robert took an imported medication he kept in a special bag. On the 6th day, she decided to jot down her notes in the little notebook she used for nursing classes. Red mark on right ankle, 3 centimeters. Color intensifies after medication at 2 p.m. Patient scratches the area when he thinks no one's watching. "Sarah, what are you doing?" The stern voice of head nurse Susan interrupted her notes. "I was just... Mr. Robert's marks are changing and..." "You're not a doctor, Sarah. Observing patients isn't your job. Stick to cleaning and that's it." But Sarah couldn't stop noticing. Robert received daily visits from his daughter, Dr. Jennifer Thompson, a respected cardiologist. During these visits, Sarah tried to stay invisible while cleaning, but she overheard their conversations. Jennifer always talked about the normal test results, how her father was doing well, but she never mentioned the marks that seemed to be spreading. One afternoon, while Robert dozed off, Sarah saw something that alarmed her. The businessman woke up startled and, thinking he was alone, pulled out an expensive ointment from his bag and frantically rubbed it on the marks. She realized he knew about the lesions and was hiding them on purpose. When he noticed her presence, his eyes filled with rage. "How long have you been standing there, so?" he growled. "I just came in, Mr. Robert, just here to change the towels. If you say anything about what you saw, I guarantee you'll never work in another hospital in this country. Understood?" Sarah nodded, but inside she was torn. She was sure something wasn't right. That night at home, while helping her 8-year-old with math homework and rocking the baby to sleep, she couldn't get Robert out of her mind. The next day, the marks were visibly worse. Robert seemed more agitated and was sweating excessively. During his daughter's visit, Sarah heard Jennifer say, "The blood tests are still normal, Dad. You're in perfect health for 55. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. Sarah knew something was terribly wrong, but who would believe a housekeeper with no medical training? At lunch, she sought out her friend Jane, a nursing assistant with 15 years of experience. "Jane, can I ask you about some symptoms I've noticed?" "Of course, Sarah. What's up?" Sarah described the marks in detail, the pattern changes, the mysterious medication. Jane listened carefully, her face growing more concerned. "That sounds like a severe allergic reaction, Sarah. Or worse, it could be a sign of poisoning." "Are you sure about what you saw?" "Absolutely. And he's hiding it from his doctor daughter. You need to tell someone, this could be serious." But when Sarah tried to talk to the head nurse, Susan, she was scolded again. "Sarah, I've already told you not to meddle in medical matters. Mr. Robert has the best doctors in New York City taking care of him. If something's wrong, they'll know." Frustrated, Sarah went back to her duties. But during her afternoon cleaning, she witnessed something that convinced her she had to act. Robert was on the phone, speaking nervously to someone. "I don't know what to do about these spots anymore. They're spreading, and the ointment isn't working. Are you sure no one will find out about the medication?" Sarah hid behind the door, her heart pounding. "If my daughter finds out I'm taking this experimental formula to look younger, she'll never forgive me. But the spots are getting worse every day." Experimental formula. The words echoed in Sarah's mind. She remembered her pharmacology classes, the warnings about untested medications. This explained everything. In the following days, Sarah watched Robert grow weaker. He tried to keep up appearances during doctor visits, but she saw how he trembled when he thought no one was looking. The spots now climbed up his legs and were starting to appear on his arms. Then, one Thursday morning, everything changed. Robert was receiving 3 specialist doctors and 2 important business partners. Sarah was cleaning the bathroom when she heard a scream. She rushed into the room and saw Robert on the floor, convulsing. His body was covered in red spots that pulsed as if alive. The visitors were in a panic, shouting for help. "Call emergency!" one of the doctors yelled. But Sarah saw something they didn't. On the nightstand was an open bottle of the experimental medication. Robert had taken a double dose, probably desperate from his worsening symptoms. "Stop!" she shouted, running to the nightstand. "It's the medication. He's having a toxic reaction." "Who are you to give medical opinions?" one of the specialists snapped. "Get out!" But Sarah didn't leave. She grabbed the bottle and read the label aloud. "Experimental rejuvenation complex. Untested. For use under medical supervision only." Just then, Dr. Jennifer rushed into the room, alerted by the emergency. She saw her father on the floor, the confused doctors, and Sarah holding the medication bottle. "What's happening here?" she asked, kneeling beside Robert. "Doctor," Sarah stepped forward with her notebook in hand. "I've been observing your father for 2 weeks. He has skin marks that change pattern every time he takes this medication. I wrote everything down here." Jennifer took the notebook and quickly read Sarah's detailed notes. Dates, times, symptom descriptions, correlations with the medication. It was more thorough than any medical chart. "My God," she murmured. "How did none of us see this?" "Because he hid it from you," Sarah explained. "He's afraid you'll find out about the experimental medication." Jennifer immediately ordered the medication stopped and began a detox protocol. Within hours, Robert was stable, but still unconscious. The spots began to fade. As they waited for Robert to wake, Jennifer spoke at length with Sarah. "How did you know it was the medication? Do you have medical training?" "I study nursing at night, doctor, and before working here I cleaned a veterinary lab. I've seen similar reactions in animals given experimental drugs." "Why didn't you speak up sooner?" Sarah looked down. "I tried, but I'm just a housekeeper. No one believes what I say." Jennifer felt a weight in her chest. How many times had she herself ignored employees in lower hierarchical positions? How much valuable information had been lost because of such arrogance? When Robert finally woke up 2 days later, he found Jennifer and Sarah talking by his bedside. His daughter was holding the notebook with tears in her eyes. "Dad, why didn't you tell me about the medication?" Robert looked at Sarah with a mix of shame and gratitude. "I was embarrassed," he admitted. "A man my age taking pills to appear young. I thought it was harmless." "It nearly cost you your life," Jennifer said. "If it weren't for Sarah's careful observation, you could have had a heart attack." Robert stared at Sarah for the first time since she had started working in his room. "What's your name?" "Sarah Johnson, sir." "Sarah Johnson," he repeated. "You saved my life." In the following days, as Robert recovered, an investigation was launched into the experimental medication. It was discovered that it had been supplied by Mitchell Parker, a former business partner of Robert's, who had been ousted from the company years earlier for unethical practices. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, back to the story. The formula had been deliberately altered to cause cumulative reactions that mimicked autoimmune diseases. Mitchell had planned for Robert to develop symptoms that would appear natural, gradually weakening him and eventually leading to the loss of control over his business. When the truth came out, Robert was shocked by the depth of his former partner's revenge, but he was even more shocked when he realized how poorly he had treated the very person who had saved his life. During a private conversation with Sarah, he asked, "Why did you insist on helping me even after I was so rude to you?" Sarah thought for a moment before answering, "My mother always taught me that doing the right thing doesn't depend on how people treat us. It depends on who we are inside." Robert felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in years, true humility. "Sarah, I'd like to do something for you." Can I pay for your nursing degree, get you and your children a better home?" "Thank you, Mr. Thompson, but I don't need money," she replied gently. "What I need is respect, not just for me, but for all the staff who work here." Robert hadn't expected that answer. He had assumed she would ask for money, benefits, promotions. Instead, she had asked for something far more valuable and harder to give, a change of character. "You're right," he said after a long pause. "I need to learn to truly see people." Robert's transformation wasn't immediate. During his weeks of recovery, he started small. He learned the names of all the cleaning staff. He began greeting the security guards. He thanked the nursing assistants. Sarah watched these changes cautiously. She had seen many people promise change in moments of crisis, only to return to old habits once the danger passed. But Robert seemed different. He started asking about people's lives, their families, their struggles. He learned that Jane, the nursing assistant, was raising 4 children alone. That Carl, the night security guard, worked 2 jobs to pay for his wife's cancer treatment. Jennifer was also undergoing a transformation. The experience of nearly losing her father by overlooking obvious signs made her question her medical practice. She began holding weekly meetings where employees at all levels could report observations about patients. "Sarah," she said one afternoon, "I'd like you to become my special assistant. You have a clinical eye that many doctors lack. But I haven't even graduated from nursing school yet, doctor. And that's exactly why you see things we, with all our formal education, miss. You look at the patient as a whole, not just at the test results." Meanwhile, the investigation into Mitchell Parker revealed an even more complex scheme. He hadn't acted alone. There was a small group of former employees and ex-partners of Robert who shared his desire for revenge. Dr. Harold Smith, one of the physicians treating Robert, had been secretly sabotaging some tests, ensuring the symptoms of poisoning wouldn't be detected. He had lost a lucrative contract to Robert's company years earlier and had harbored a quiet grudge. The discovery of this betrayal shook Robert deeply. Harold was someone he had trusted for over a decade. "How could I have been so blind?" he asked Sarah during one of their daily conversations, which had become routine. "You weren't blind," Sarah replied. "You trusted the right people for the wrong reasons and distrusted the wrong people for the same reasons." "What do you mean?" "You trusted Dr. Harold because he had a degree and money, and you doubted me because all I had was cleaning and unfinished studies, but character isn't bought with a diploma." Robert reflected on those words for days. He realized he had built his entire life on the wrong values: status, money, appearances. All of it had nearly cost him his life. 2 months after the incident, Robert had fully recovered physically. But emotionally, he was a changed man. He decided to make structural changes in his company and his life. First, he created a scholarship program for all employees who wanted to specialize or complete their education. Sarah was the first beneficiary, with her entire nursing degree paid for, along with a full salary so she could focus on her studies. Second, he implemented a new corporate code of conduct, establishing that respectful treatment of all employees, regardless of position, was mandatory, and any violation would result in immediate termination. Third, he set up an emergency fund for employees facing family or health crises. "Dad, I'm proud of you," Jennifer said during Sunday dinner, "but I need to confess something. I've also learned important lessons from all this." "What lessons?" "That being a doctor doesn't make me better than anyone, that the humblest person can have the most valuable insight, and that I too had become arrogant without realizing it." Robert smiled. It was the first time in years he and Jennifer had a truly deep conversation about something other than work. 6 months later, Sarah graduated from nursing school with honors. Robert was in the front row at the graduation ceremony, standing and applauding as she received her diploma. Jennifer stood beside him, clapping too. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. After graduation, Sarah received an offer to work as head nurse at another hospital with a salary 3 times higher. But she chose to stay, working directly with Jennifer on the integrated observation program they had created. "Why did you stay?" Robert asked. The offer was much better. Because here, I can truly make a difference, Sarah answered. And besides, you're my family now. Robert felt his eyes grow moist. He had gained far more than a saved life. He had gained a new perspective on the world. A year later, the program created by Sarah and Jennifer was being implemented in other hospitals across the city. The integrated observation model, where employees at all levels collaborated in the early identification of symptoms, was regularly saving lives. Jane, the nursing assistant, was promoted to supervisor of the program. Carl, the security guard, landed a better-paying job after Robert personally recommended him. The lives of dozens of employees had improved significantly. But the most important change had happened within Robert himself. He had become a kinder, humbler man, more attentive to those around him. His relationship with Jennifer grew stronger, and for the first time in decades, he began forming genuine friendships. Mitchell Parker and Dr. Harold Smith were prosecuted and convicted. The settlement money was entirely redirected to the scholarship program Robert had created. 2 years after the incident, Robert decided to share his story publicly. During a charity event to raise funds for the hospital, he took the stage with Sarah by his side. "Many people ask me what the best investment of my life was," he began. "For years, I thought it was my first company, or maybe the purchase of the factory in Tampa. But today, I know the best investment was the day I chose to listen to a housekeeper who was trying to save my life." Sarah was visibly emotional. She had never imagined she would stand on a stage, being recognized by hundreds of important people. "Sarah taught me that wisdom doesn't come from degrees or money," Robert continued. "It comes from the heart, from careful observation, from the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. She didn't just save my life, she saved my soul." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Sarah cried, thinking about how drastically her life had changed since that day she decided to write down her observations about the strange spots. After the event, Robert had one last surprise. He had bought a house in the same neighborhood where Sarah grew up, but on a better street for her and her children. "Mr. Robert, I can't accept this," she protested. "Sarah, for 2 years, you've refused every thank you I've tried to give. Let me do this. It's not charity, it's gratitude." Sarah accepted the house, but on one condition, that Robert would visit regularly for dinner with her and the kids. He happily agreed. 3 years passed. Sarah was now a respected nurse, responsible for training new staff in the integrated observation program. She had married Dr. Andrew Stewart, a young doctor who had joined Jennifer's team and was charmed by both Sarah's competence and humility. Robert had become a grandfather figure to Sarah's children and the godfather at her wedding. Jennifer was the matron of honor. Their relationship had evolved from employer-employee to a deep, genuine friendship. One Thursday morning, exactly 4 years after the incident with the spots, Robert was hospitalized again. But this time, it was just for a preventive gallbladder surgery. Nothing serious. Sarah was on duty and was naturally assigned to care for him. "Do you remember the day we truly met?" Robert asked as she checked his vitals. "How could I forget? You nearly had a fit when I mentioned the spots. I was a very foolish man back then." "You weren't foolish," Sarah corrected with a smile. "You were lost, but you found yourself. With your help." "No, Mr. Robert, you found yourself because you wanted to. I just showed you the way." Robert smiled. Even after all these years, Sarah remained humble, refusing to take credit for the transformation she had sparked. That afternoon, as Robert napped after his successful surgery, Sarah received a phone call that would change her life once again. It was from Columbia University Medical Center. "Nurse Sarah, this is Dr. Richardson, director of the medical program. We'd like to invite you to be a guest professor for a new course we're creating, Humanized Clinical Observation." Sarah nearly dropped the phone. "Professor, I think there's been a mistake. I've only been a nurse for 3 years." "There's no mistake. Your work with integrated observation is revolutionizing hospital medicine. We want you to teach future doctors how to see what truly matters in patients." When Robert woke up and Sarah told him about the invitation, He smiled wider than she'd ever seen. "Professor Sarah," he said, "has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" "I don't know if I'm ready for this." "Sarah, you were ready from the day you decided to care about a patient everyone else ignored. Accept the invitation. The world needs more people like you teaching medicine." And so Sarah accepted. Her first lecture at the university was about the importance of detailed observation and respectful communication with every member of the hospital team. Robert was in the audience, a special guest to share his perspective as a patient. During the presentation, Sarah showed the original notebook where she had recorded her observations about Robert. The students were fascinated by the simplicity and effectiveness of the method. "Medicine isn't just about sophisticated equipment and expensive tests," she explained. "Sometimes the answer is right in front of us. We just need the humility to look." One of the students raised their hand. "Professor, how did you find the courage to keep insisting when the doctors didn't believe you?" Sarah glanced at Robert in the audience before answering. "Because I learned that doing the right thing isn't about courage, it's about love. When you truly care about someone's well-being, you find strength you never knew you had." After the lecture, Robert and Sarah walked across the university campus. It was a sunny September afternoon, and the gardens were in full bloom. "Sarah, I have a question for you," Robert said, stopping near a yellow jacaranda tree. "What is it? Do you regret anything that's happened these past few years?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I regret not speaking up sooner. How many people could have been helped if I'd had more confidence in my observations? And I regret taking so long to recognize the value of the people around me," Robert said. "But you know what? Maybe our regrets are exactly what we needed to become who we are today." They continued walking in comfortable silence, two people from completely different worlds who had found an unlikely yet profound friendship. 5 years had passed since that fateful day in room 312. The integrated observation program created by Sarah and Jennifer was being implemented in hospitals across the United States and beginning to attract international attention. Robert, now 60, had partially retired from business to dedicate himself to managing the foundation he'd established. The Sarah Johnson Foundation provided scholarships, free medical support, and job training programs for low-income families. Sarah, at 33, was now Dr. Sarah Johnson Stewart, having completed her medical degree with a specialization in clinical diagnosis. She maintained her position as a professor at the university and as program coordinator at the hospital. Jennifer had become one of the most respected doctors in the country, known not just for her technical skill, but for her humanized approach to medicine. She and Sarah had co-authored a book, Looking Beyond Tests: The Art of Clinical Observation. On a Thursday morning, Sarah was in her office at the university when she received an unexpected visitor. It was a young woman around 25 years old, wearing a cleaning uniform. "Dr. Sarah?" the young woman said timidly. "My name is Amanda Brooks. I work cleaning the labs here at the university." "Come in, Amanda Brooks. How can I help you?" "It's just, I've noticed some strange things in one of the labs, and no one takes me seriously when I mention them. But I heard your lecture last week on clinical observation, and I thought maybe you'd listen to me." Sarah smiled, instantly reminded of herself years ago. "Sit here, Amanda Brooks. Tell me everything you've observed, down to the smallest details." As she listened to the young woman describe irregularities in the lab equipment, Sarah felt a familiar emotion. It was the same sensation she'd had years ago when she decided to note her observations about Robert. The feeling that something important was being overlooked by those who should have been paying attention. 3 hours later, Amanda's observations had led to the discovery of a flaw in the equipment that could have compromised critical research. The young woman was praised by the university and offered a full scholarship to study biomedical engineering. That evening, Sarah called Robert to tell him about the day. "It seems the circle is complete," he said. "You've become the person who believes in others' observations." "Actually, I think the circle is just beginning," Sarah replied. "Every person who learns to value others' observations creates new circles." "Such profound wisdom, Professor Dr. Sarah," Robert teased. "I learned it from a stubborn businessman who nearly poisoned himself out of vanity," she shot back, laughing. They laughed together, a genuine laugh shared by people who not only had a history, but a deep understanding of the value of humility and paying attention to the details others ignore. 10 years had passed since the incident with the mysterious stains. Sarah and Robert, now 38 and 65 respectively, still met regularly for dinner to talk about life. Robert had become a wise man, respected not just for his wealth but for his generosity and humility. His foundation had helped thousands of people improve their lives through education and medical support. Sarah was internationally recognized as a pioneer in the field of humanized clinical observation. Her teaching method was being used in medical schools around the world. Jennifer had married a fellow doctor and had 2 children. She always said learning to listen to Sarah had been the most important lesson of her medical career. On a special spring morning, Robert woke up with an idea that excited him more than any business deal had in decades. He called Sarah. "Sarah, I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "How about we write our memoirs together? The story of how a housekeeper and an arrogant businessman became family." "Robert, do you think people would be interested in our story?" "Sarah, our story could inspire others to value those who are often invisible. It could teach humility, observation, and the importance of listening to one another." And so they did. The book, From Housekeeper to Professor, From Arrogant to Humble, a story of transformation, became a bestseller not just in the United States, but in dozens of countries. The talks they gave together filled auditoriums. Robert always began by recounting how he'd nearly lost his life to pride and vanity, and Sarah would end by explaining how careful observation and love for others could save lives. One day, during one of these lectures in San Diego, a woman in the audience raised her hand. "Dr. Sarah, when did you know you had made the right choice by insisting on Mr. Robert's symptoms?" Sarah looked at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. "Truthfully, I never knew if I was making the right choice," she answered honestly. "I only knew it was the necessary choice. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't about being certain. It's about caring enough to try." Robert added, "And sometimes receiving help isn't about deserving it. It's about being open to recognizing that we all have something to learn from one another, regardless of social status or formal education." After the lecture, they walked along the Hudson River, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "Robert," Sarah said after a long silence, "do you think our story would have been different if I hadn't had the courage to insist that day?" "It certainly would have been different," he replied. "I probably would have had a heart attack within days. You would have continued being treated as invisible. Jennifer would have remained a technically competent but emotionally distant doctor. Dozens of others wouldn't have been helped by our foundation." It's amazing how one small act of courage can change so many lives. It wasn't a small act, Sarah. It was a tremendous act of love. And love always has consequences far beyond what we can imagine. 15 years after the incident, Robert organized a special celebration. It was the 10th anniversary of Sarah's graduation from medical school, and he wanted to honor all they had achieved together. The party gathered over 200 people in the main hall of the hospital where it all began. Present were all the staff who had benefited from the programs they created, dozens of students Sarah had taught, doctors who had implemented her methods, and entire families helped by the foundation. During his speech, Robert looked at Sarah, now a mature woman of 43, respected and admired, a mother of 3, including a baby born 2 years earlier, and felt deep gratitude. 15 years ago, I was a man lost in my own arrogance, he said into the microphone. I thought success was measured only in money and power. I treated people as objects, not as human beings. And because of that blindness, I nearly lost my life. He paused, visibly emotional. But an extraordinary woman, whom I didn't even deem worthy of eye contact back then, refused to let me die. Not because I deserved it, but because she had a heart that didn't distinguish between important people and ordinary people. To her, every life had value. Sarah was silently crying at her table. Sarah didn't just save my physical life. She taught me to see the beauty of humility, the strength of careful observation, and the transformative power of unconditional love. She taught me that the most important people are often those society considers invisible. Robert turned directly to Sarah. My dear friend, you transform not just my life, but the lives of hundreds. You showed that knowledge without humility is useless, and that humility with careful observation can move mountains. He gestured for her to join him on stage. That's why today I announced the creation of the Sarah Johnson Institute for Humanized Medicine, dedicated to teaching doctors worldwide about the importance of integrated observation and respect for all healthcare professionals. The audience erupted in applause. Sarah stepped onto the stage, completely surprised and overwhelmed. Robert, she said into the microphone, still with tears in her eyes, when I was a young housekeeper, I dreamed of making a difference in people's lives. I never imagined that dream would come true in such a beautiful and profound way. She looked at the audience, seeing familiar and beloved faces. But I've learned something important over all these years. No transformation happens alone. Robert transformed because he wanted to transform. I was able to grow because I found people who believed in me. All of us here are the result of each other's support and love. She paused, gathering her thoughts. What I wish for most is that our story inspires others to pay attention to the details that may seem small, but can be enormous, to look beyond appearances, to value every person who crosses their path. Because in the end, we're all human beings trying to do the best we can with the circumstances we have. The celebration continued late into the night, with many stories being shared, tears of gratitude being shed, and plans being made for the future. 20 years had passed since that fateful morning when Sarah first noticed the spots on Robert's leg. The world had changed a lot, but their friendship remained as solid as a rock. Robert, now 70, had devoted himself entirely to philanthropy. His foundation was one of the most respected in the country, and the Sarah Johnson Institute had trained thousands of healthcare professionals in humanized observation methods. Sarah, at 48, was the Institute's director and one of the most renowned doctors in the United States. Her children had grown up seeing her work as normal, not fully understanding how special their mother was until they began hearing other people's stories about her. One autumn afternoon, Robert and Sarah were sitting in her garden watching their grandchildren play. Robert had become an adoptive grandfather to the children, and they affectionately called him Grandpa Bob. Sarah, he said, watching one of the granddaughters try to teach her younger brother how to tie his shoes, do you think we've really made a difference in the world? Sarah smiled, looking at the statistics she had received that morning about the Institute. Robert, last year our methods helped identify over 1,000 cases early that might have gone unnoticed. We saved lives, prevented unnecessary suffering, and taught humility to hundreds of proud doctors. But do you think people have truly changed? That they've learned to value one another? Sarah thought for a moment, watching one of the granddaughters gently help her brother with his shoes. I think we've planted seeds. Some sprouted right away. Others will take years to bloom, and some may never sprout. But every person who learned to look at others with more care and kindness is a victory. Robert nodded in agreement. You know something, Sarah? If I could go back in time, I wouldn't change a single thing that happened. Not even the part where you almost, not even that part. Because it was exactly that experience that taught me who I really wanted to be. Sometimes we need to almost lose everything to discover what truly matters. That evening, Sarah received a phone call that deeply moved her. It was from Amanda Brooks, the young janitor who had sought her help years before. Dr. Sarah, I graduated today with a degree in biomedical engineering, she said, elated. And I've already received an offer to work at a medical research lab in New York City. Amanda, what wonderful news! I'm so proud of you. Doctor, I want you to know that none of this would have been possible if you hadn't listened to me that day. You taught me that my observations had value. After hanging up, Sarah felt a familiar warmth in her heart. It was the same feeling she had 20 years ago when she decided to write down her observations about Robert. The feeling that every small act of kindness and attention created ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. The next day, she shared the news with Robert over breakfast. Another seed that sprouted, he said, smiling. Amanda will teach other engineers to pay attention to details, who in turn will create better equipment. That will help doctors diagnose diseases earlier. That will save lives. The circle never stops growing, Sarah agreed. And to think it all started with a shy housekeeper who refused to ignore some strange stains. They laughed, but it was a laugh filled with reverence for the mysterious way life connects seemingly small events to enormous consequences. 25 years had passed. Robert, now 75, had developed age-related health issues, but his mind remained sharp and his heart as generous as ever. Sarah, at 53, was globally recognized as a pioneer in humanized medicine. She had received honors from universities on 4 continents, and her methods were taught in over 30 countries. But for both of them, the most important achievements were the personal ones. Robert had learned to love and be loved genuinely. Sarah had proven to herself that humble beginnings don't limit the impact a person can have on the world. On a special spring morning, they met in room 312 of the hospital where it all began. The room had been turned into a small memorial space with photos and documents telling the story of their transformation. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day?" Robert asked, smiling. "You're here to clean, not to give medical opinions," Sarah recited from memory, also smiling. "What an arrogant, foolish man I was." "You weren't foolish, Robert. You were scared. Scared of aging, scared of losing control, scared of being vulnerable." "And you? What were you afraid of back then?" Sarah thought carefully. "I was afraid of not being heard. Afraid my observations wouldn't matter. Afraid I'd never make a real difference in someone's life. And now? Now I know every observation made with love matters. That every kind word makes a difference. That we don't need to be perfect or hold important positions to contribute meaningfully to the world." Robert took Sarah's hand, a fatherly gesture that had become natural between them over the years. "Sarah, I want you to know you've been the greatest blessing of my life. Not just because you saved my life, but because you taught me how to truly live. And you taught me that real transformation is always possible, no matter our age or how deeply rooted our habits are. You showed me that the courage to change is one of the most beautiful things a person can have." They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the depth of the bond they'd built. "Robert," Sarah finally said, "I have a confession to make." "What is it?" "In those early days when you treated me poorly, I almost gave up, almost stopped trying to help you. What made you stay?" "A conversation I had with my oldest daughter. She was only 8 at the time, but she said something that stayed with me." "What did she say?" "She said, 'Mommy, if everyone gives up on mean people, who will help them become good?' That night, I decided I wouldn't give up on you." Robert felt his eyes grow damp. He'd been saved by an 8-year-old girl he'd never even met. "I'd like to meet that wise little girl," he said. "You've known her for years, Robert." "It's Chloe, my eldest daughter, who is now a pediatrician and works at the Institute." Robert laughed, realizing he had been indirectly impacted by 3 generations of Sarah's family. The end of the story. So, dear listener, what did you think of this story of transformation and hope? Share in the comments which part moved you the most. Leave your like and subscribe for more heartwarming stories.